America, in China. Okay, so they were all over the world. Okay, and eventually they built up this worldwide civilization, which then somehow collapsed, either through wars and or geophysical changes. Okay, but their science officer was a being known as Enki. And Enki and Enlil were actually half brothers, and so there was some rivalry there because over who was going to be commander. Enki ends up, this is all according to these tablets that predate the Bible by 4,000 years. Enki ends up in the Abzug, which has been translated as Africa. And it was Enki, there were some strikes, there was some revolts among the Anunnaki who said the work is hard. We don't like being in these mines, digging for this gold. And so they were having some problems, and they were trying to figure out what they're going to do. And by the way, the reason they wanted the gold was for various reasons, perhaps to produce energy, perhaps for this white powder manipulation, but primarily to take back to their home planet to repair their ozone layer. And this is the exact same thing that Edward Teller and others have proposed in repairing our own ozone layer, is to put gold, powdered gold, which is a highly conductive metal, and seed it into the upper atmosphere to seal off these ozone holes. Okay, so they said, okay, what are we going to do about this? And Enki is the one who said, well, I got a solution. Instead of abandoning this planet or killing all the workers because they won't work, why don't we create a slave race, a worker race, okay? And interestingly enough, they had the same arguments that we have. They said, well, it's not up to us to play God. And his counter-argument was that number one, we're not playing God because we're not creating some new race. We're just tweaking the DNA of an existing being, okay? And two, we need this so that we can get the goal we need and all like that. And his view prevailed. And then in the tablets, they tell you how this was accomplished. They took the ovum of a primitive earth female, shall we call her Lucy? And they impregnated it with the sperm of a Anunnaki male, and then implanted the fertilized egg in the womb of an Anunnaki female, who carried it to term, did not have a natural childbirth, but had a cesarean childbirth, and it produced what they call the Adama, the Adam, the first hybrid. Okay, and initially these hybrids were like mules. They could not procreate. So they had to keep creating all their workers, okay? It's a long, lengthy, fascinating story. But eventually there was the whole thing here, but eventually they finally tweaked it to the point to where the mules could reproduce, and this is where we have modern man. Yes?
What about scientists that have mysteriously died or disappeared? Any connection with these laboratories underground?
Are you talking about the microbiologist? Yes, that's pretty spooky too, because I am well aware of that. There's a whole how many are there now? 14 or something like that? 18? There's a dozen or more of the world's most preeminent microbiologists who suddenly, in the wake of the anthrax attack, suddenly died or disappeared and never been heard from. Why? Because they could have told us where that anthrax came from, even though it's now leaked out that it was weapons grade and that it could only have been produced by the United States. And yet nobody has been caught, nobody's been prosecuted for this. Deadly attack, people died. And it also worries me because if there is another major anthrax attacks against some civilian population, say in Los Angeles or San Francisco or whatever, where are the guys who are going to come say, well, here's what you do about it. Here's the antidote.
Well, I just wanted to add something to that. There's some people think that these microbiologists were connected with the study of gene-specific diseases, that maybe SARS is a representative of, and that can affect different populations that maybe have blue eyes or black skin or whatever.
When the Israelis like to design a disease that would only attack Arabs. I know it. That's the problem. In fact, yes, they've been working on that ever since Vietnam. In Vietnam, they were trying to come up with some pathogens that would attack Asians. It's really spooky. That's why I say we got to get rid of this secrecy and we got to get rid of this national security state for our own protection. Because, see, here's the whole key to freedom. if I allow any law, any policy which restricts somebody else's freedom, I'm not free. Because once you allow that, then what's to protect you? Nothing. Pastor Martin Niemöller in Germany pretty well articulated that. He said, well, they came for the Jews, but I wasn't Jewish, so I didn't say anything. He said they came for the Masons, but I wasn't a Mason, so I didn't say anything. Came for the Gypsies, but I wasn't a Gypsy, so I didn't say anything. He said when they came for me, I didn't have anybody to turn to. The only way that we can guarantee our personal freedom is to guarantee everybody's personal freedom, even the ones you don't like, even your skinhead Nazis, even your weirdos, even your, yes, even the Republicans. We've got to guarantee everybody's personal freedom, because once you get the ball rolling in curtailing freedom, then there's no stopping it, and there's no guarantee that you won't get caught up in it. And they'll say, everybody with a beard, you go to the camp. Okay? Yes.
Could you go into the whole connection with Antarctica and your earlier parts of your presentation? So I've heard a bit about it, but I'm not that clear.
About Antarctica? Oh my God! Well, we could have another whole presentation on that. That gets into Agartha, the Nazi base down there, Queen Maud's land, which they renamed Neuschwabenland. That was where all the submarines were heading after World War II. And then you get into the more modern times when they found the lake under there, like Vostok, and the warm lake under Antarctica. There's all sorts of stuff going on in Antarctica. Perhaps this is one of the places where they are studying these microorganisms, because if you'll recall, they suddenly had a bunch of doctors and medical personnel that they had to evacuate out of Antarctica. And by the way, I don't know if it's still that way, but at one point they pretty well had sealed off. Antarctica is one of those places that us free Americans really can't just go to. You can't just say, oh, I want a ticket to Antarctica, I'm going to go down and look around. There's all kinds of stuff, but to me the main concern with Antarctica is the Ross Ice Shelf, because it's melting. All right, the North Pole, the U.S. Navy meteorological station at the North Pole said there will be no ice at the North Pole by 2015, which is pretty close. Okay, now that's not a big deal, because at the North Pole all the ice is sitting in water, so the volume will be the same. You're going to have water instead of the ice. Okay, but Antarctica is a different situation. You've got the Ross Ice Shelf, which is a huge, probably the size of Texas or even bigger, that's sitting on a landmass. And it's not even, it's kind of at a slant, and it's being held essentially by an ice pin, okay, that's keeping it from sliding off into the South Atlantic, and that ice pin is melting, just like the North Pole. And by the way, they talk about global warming, but let me tell you something. It's bigger than that. The ice caps on Mars are melting. The sunspot activity, they say, well, we're going through a cycle, but it'll calm down, but it hadn't calmed down. There are other perturbances that they've noted on some of the other planets. This is a solar system-wide thing. Now, it doesn't mean it's doomsday, maybe it's just cyclic, we don't know, we haven't been here that long. But and I'm not trying to say there's no global warming, but it's not just global warming, and global warming is not just the results of our energy policies and automobiles, although that's certainly obviously not helping matters. But the problem with Antarctica is if the pin melts and the Ross Ice Shelf slides off in the South Atlantic, it's going to raise the water tables around the world by about 12 feet, which would inundate New York, London, probably Paris, San Francisco, Los Angeles. We're going to have a real problem, okay? And this probably will all happen within our lifetime. So what do y'all do about it? Beats me, you're going to have to decide for yourself. But I know I'm in a very solid place in Texas, and I have an underground house with a log house sitting on it, my own well, and I'm there, and that's no guarantee. I've since coming out here, I've had a lot of people tell me there's going to be a terrorist attack on September the 27th. Oh no, I'll be in Australia. So a lot of good's going to do me, right? So what I say, my game plan is hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Why are these aliens at war with us?
They're not at war with us, we're at war with them.
Okay.
Because they want to keep all this secret. According to several sources, they have approached the leadership of the world, various national leaders, and they said, okay, we'll make contact, let's deal, we'll swap technology, but you guys got to promise to lay down your weapons,